just a few things. What we exactly wait from this conversation is like share our opinions. We decided to switch our focus a little bit from deliver a ready-made solution and then get feedback from developers, because at this case it could be a little bit more difficult to make any changes. And sometimes people really ask, hey, it could be so simple to make a small changes in your logic. We would be really happy to have something like that. And it's why today we have this conversation, pretty interesting conversation, how we really could attract next million or billion users. Because as you know, we have a huge gap between user experience in centralized exchanges. And we know that FTX was pretty popular, so many people were interested in use it, and how we can really create great experience in DeFi space. And now, as I could see, there is some interest from people to use DeFi tools. So it's more related to the smart contract. But what we are really interested to discuss today is how we can create automated strategies, how we create bots, how we connect maybe new things which could be really connect some great achievements in development, things like machine learning trading bots or something which could create deep analytical things with on-chain, make it trustless, so users should really understand and trust this solution using blockchain security model. And at the same time, we can really allow third party to manage account. And before we start,
okay, Mikhail, sorry. Before you begin, it looks like everybody is on the call. So thanks for everyone to join. This stream will be recorded. It should be recorded by YouTube so we can all share it later. I believe everyone is on the call at this point. So just to recap, we are streaming from Zoom into YouTube. That means that later on when you are speaking about your part or like presenting your thing, just feel free to share the screen so that it overwrites and you share your press or whatever schemes you want to show. Thanks to our friend developers from Gelato, Brahma, Mellow, and Wonderland for joining. Everybody is building some amazing stuff in DeFi. Some are very much related to strategies and automation, some are a bit less, like Gearbox is not initially about automation, but it actually needs it. So now we are trying to discover what the Gearbots v2.1 will be. And of course, everybody from other protocols is very much free to present what they're working on at some point and during the call, and very excited to learn about that. Yeah, so that's basically it. Let's try to fit into 1 hour, and I will use this intro as like a benchmark to when the presentation will start later in the recording. That's it, right? Anything else we need to know, or good to kick off?
Yeah, I think it's time to start. So thanks for
this you have
great
the agenda.
Intro.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so the main goal of today's meeting and today's discussion, of course, at first for Gearbox developers understand better needs and the way how we can create this way in the smart contract level in the version 2.1 to really help people who build strategies and who can help with automation to create really new user experience. And today's conversation is more targeted for developers. So as Ivan already said, we are going to record this call and then provide as learning materials for people who will decide to build bots. And really, we strongly believe that it's a pretty interesting niche which could grow pretty fast and provide new user experience in DeFi. And before we started, just for a short recap how Gearbox work and what the problems we faced before. As you can see on this picture in our architecture, Gearbox itself is a two-side protocol. On the left side, there are liquidity providers who provide liquidity to the pool, and they are more interested or more focused on passive investment. So their profile is similar with people who use Aave or Compound as liquidity suppliers there. And they're willing to get a really high income, great yields, but do not manage their positions manually, such a kind of passive thing. But what really makes Gearbox unique is the right side of the protocol on the schema. And here you can see a trader or strategist. This is an actor who are definitely interested in managed funds with leverage. So we in Gearbox created a new DeFi primitive, which is called credit account. And credit account itself behaves like a smart contract wallet. So when trader or strategies provide initial funds to this credit account could immediately take margin loan from the pool, and then trader could send different transactions on it, and they could be executed on behalf of credit account with third-party protocols. However, Gearbox itself does not allow trader or strategists to withdraw money into the pocket. So you as a strategist could really manage X10 or X20 more money and implement different strategies in the more native way. So credit account could be simply considered as your smart contract wallet, and you have maybe a little reduced ability to manage funds. You can't send them directly to somehow and so on. However, you can really interact today with major protocol. And when we implemented such a things, protocol Leaf since December 2021, we found that there are some problems when people really face. The first problem that users should continuously monitor their portfolio not to be liquidated. And it's a pretty bad for their user experience and nervous system. If you open short or long position, you should continuously monitor that you are not liquidated. And at the moment, we have no ready-made tool to set up stop losses or limit orders. Another part that there is no good tool for automated portfolio management, because sometimes it's very, very good to have something which could check different interest rate, even for leverage farming, and really move your funds across different strategies in automatic way. Of course, some custom things could be implemented, but if you really want to build your own bot who can manage your credit account, at this case, you should provide and keep your private key on a server, because usually this trading bot is a server which listens to blockchain event, do some calculations, and as a result, make a decision to rebalance portfolio, and after that, set different transactions to the network. However, it's a really not safe way to do things, because as you know, LastPass was hacked some time ago. So for example, Patricia, malicious actor, was able to get your username and password from your host service, hack it, get the access to private key, and steal all your money, which is very, very bad consequences. So from the safety standpoint, it's not a really good thing. And another part, of course, related for people who really provide some capital and manage it using multi-sig. At this case, there is no way that you can control your credit account using multi-sig. For example, for big changes in portfolio, of course, it's required a consensus. And if you have, for example, such a multi-sig 5 of 9, it's a pretty good to make a big decision to get quorum. However, for really frequent decision like changing farming or changing position, it could be good to have a limited access way. And the last part, that walls do not provide flexibility or tailor experience. And in this case, we definitely could allow users to provide money into different vaults, and then it doesn't provide the flexibility which is already pretty good to have, because of course you can trust Yearn or different vaults, but here it's a problem if you want to do something more tailored, more flexible. And bots themselves, I can show here, could be an actor who are allowed to connect to really create account and execute automated strategy. As you can see, at this case, if you're familiar with Gearbox on the dev side, there are a function which called multi-call. So it allows you to execute a bunch of transactions and then make a full collateral check. So at this case, these bots, just a short introduction how they work, could really allow you to execute some transactions on behalf of user, and bots like are immutable smart contracts which user allowed to do that. So we can see a few use cases here. The first one is automated strategy bot, which could execute different transactions. And today, I believe we can have a really good discussion with Brahma and Mello, who are already built automated strategy, because in this case, maybe bots could be beneficial for you to manage your position, not to close it, but use an active actor. And at the same time, you could be connected to some wallet and manage such position for them. It's like a copy trading. These bots could be used for health factor protection, not to be liquidated, and to set up the limit orders here. And this maybe, there are a few questions for people who build automated strategy. So how you can see we can provide a service for users who really want to not to provide funds for your strategy, but connect your strategy, and maybe you can find similar examples on Binance. So how we can really market this product? I don't know, Mello, Brahma guy, what do you think about this way?
I think as an industry, right, we are more towards self-custody in a way, right? So having bots directly on your credit account like provides a much easier way and safe way for the users to get the automation of the strategy directly, right? Without taking any additional smart contract risks in a way. So it's actually like useful for the users as well, right?
And I think I can add that from our side that actually we already have the protection for the health factor, and we can build on the side the automation for switching the positions, but it would be much nicer if Gearbox would have this on the side of Gearbox, because if everyone would build this kind of solution on their side using Gearbox, this would be even less secure if there would be the one solution that is audited and everyone can use it. So I think it's much better in terms of the security, and it's really great that you're doing this.
Yeah, but it's some change in our mind and how we market the product. So as it was before, and maybe it was really follows the technical possibility, usually people provide their money to the vault, and each vault has a manager, and it looks like you put your money to the vault and you trust this manager. In this case, you really allow manager to manage your funds without direct access. So how we can really build trust with potential users, maybe who can at least provide some partial management. For example, I want to allow you to manage the 30% of my portfolio for Melo, and 30% for Brahma, and 40% I'd like to manage by myself. How to build trust with end users to allow you to do that?
It could be like a good way to delegate the assets, right? So part of your tokens in the credit account, if they can be approved for certain operators, that could be like a really way to ensure like you are exposed to one single provider in a way, but at the same time get the benefits of multiple providers, right?
Yeah, good. And what do you think about using a few bots together from different sources? Because I believe that if we can really create such a how to say experience when user potentially could build a complex strategy. For example, I can allow your bot to manage my portfolio, and at the same time, I'm willing to set up some limit orders to really build stop losses and so on. How we can create a really useful interface to help professional players use some new tools.
I think this also highly depends on the tiers of the users, because like for the professional users, this can be like some kind of specialized contracts that they deploy and can use it like an intermediary that can switch between different protocols, different strategies, and so on. But for the users who want to deploy like not very much funds into different protocols, maybe the vaults is a better solution because it will be more gas efficient in these terms. So these are just two sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's true. So just a few things to explain for people who are interested how to build bot, and we already have a short workshop about that and how it works. And in Gearbox, we really have a function which is called bot multi-call in credit facade. And who are familiar with our smart contracts, you can find it in version 2.1. So users should allow some smart contract to execute this method. And of course, at any point of time, user could deny to continue bot to use something. And in this case, the trust model, which we are going to offer for end users, would be based on two significant points. The first one, that the bot could be executed in two different ways. The first one, we can talk about permission bots. For example, if you are an institutional player, or if you are willing to build your own custom solution and do not provide it into bot store when other people could use your bot, you can create a modifier in Solidity code, which will allow to execute or run this code only for limited actors. And another part is permissionless, and it's more related to automation using decentralized services like Wonderland or Gelata. So in this case, everybody could execute this method. However, for both cases, even if you trust 100% for your permission actors, we definitely advise to build a trust model based on limits, how you as a user allow third-party bot to use your funds. For example, at this case, you can see three major blocks. The first one is a called store state, and this function, as in their idea, store some parameters or make a snapshot of significant parameters before running bots. So it means that you already pass the need of this call, because of course, if you have some requirements like the price should be more than or so on, it should be before this call, this function. So, for example, we can store current CVL based on chaining price oracle. Then we can call multi-call, which will execute transaction you already have. And after that, we can make additional check that accumulated slippage is less than you allow to spend for a bot. Because if you allow bot to execute a lot of transactions somewhere, there are some possibility for malicious actors to really set up slippage, play with different rates on Uniswap or other DEXs, and really try to steal money. If you have a really smart system which build trust, for example, you allow these bots to run in some period of time, non-often X, or you store the previous time when this bot was called, and you compute the slippage, you can really understand the potential loss which could you get for the operation, because Uniswap and other DEXs have a slippage. And if bot use your limit, this transaction would be reverted. In Gearbox, we do not trust that. So I believe to build this trust blocks, and maybe it's our next topic with you guys, is a very, very crucial, because people would trust your code. And if it's a mutable bot contract, if you build a good trust model, it means that people could understand potential losses and, of course, benefits if they allow you to manage their portfolio and allow your bot to execute different strategy on your credit account. So what do you think about this trust model? And what do you think could really have more demand, some permissioned or permissionless bots in this case?
Yeah, I think that's super exciting to have this kind of role model and trust model. And I think both parts are good, like permissionless and permissioned, because it also depends on what kind of user do you have. Is it an institution, or it's just the end user, or any other protocol? And in terms of the role model, it's good to have a set of roles that, like, the one role can do only part of the things in the protocol, the other role can withdraw funds or deposit or something. And actually, I even don't understand why providers of the wallets, or like maybe Gnosis Safe, don't implement yet this kind of models, because this is just much safer for everyone to have this trust model in the protocol, and when they self-custody their funds.
Yeah, and at this case, what do you think about really attracting some good managers? So as I can see, it's like a lack of solutions, because I can see some different actors in the market. There are people who are really great in analyzing, and I do not talk only about blockchain like Nansen. Of course, there are some big quants, big brains who really know how to build strategy. But in this case, there are no infrastructure where they can ask people to provide funds to manage them. At the same time, I can see there are some wallets which already try to build similar things like Puro Combo, when you can build a different bunch of transactions and you really can build a trigger. And I can see some automation platforms, and some of them happily today with us, who already help people. But can we really simplify for each side the ability to manage? So our goal here is to create, for example, for people who are very good in portfolio management, who know and can predict maybe things, analyze market, a really good interface to really interact with us. But in this case, what do you think we could focus more? permissioned actors. So it looks like, for example, people who are good in this building strategy could interact with some private firms and provide their service, or more for permissionless and really make a next step from vaults to manage their own portfolio automatically in more decentralized way. What do you think? Which thing would be more used, and which things we should focus first?
I'll jump here real quick. Hi, I'm Surex Gorilla. I'm from Wonderland. And full disclosure, Wonderland is not an automation network per se. Like, we do work as collaborators of the Keeper network, but we are not the Keeper network itself. We come here because we believe that automation should be permissionless and decentralized, and that like completely aligns with what you're saying and the objective of Gearbox 2.1. In terms of if bots should be centralized or decentralized, you have this, as you were saying, right? You have this risk of, hey, maybe the bot can manipulate the market, can sandwich the transaction, and like basically screw the user. This could be avoided. One option is to avoid this by requiring the permissionless bot to bond a certain amount of assets that can be later be slashed if the keeper or if the bot, let's say, is malicious. So in order to work the transaction, they will need some bond, and if they are malicious, you have like 1 week to propose a slashing of the bot. That's one option in order to keep, I believe at least, the things permissionless, but at the same time secure.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. And on the next slide, what I really like in such a things, let's make hands dirty. We already built some example of a bots, because we definitely want to create a great developer experience. And I want to ask Dmitry, our smart contract developer, to present how to build limit order bot and tell a little bit more in details, which could be interesting for people who are willing to build and follow all potential threads and blocks, how to implement this limit order. Dima, are you ready?
Yeah, thank you.
Can you show your screen maybe and make a short introduction, how it's built, is it simple, and which parts should really take more attention?
Yeah, okay. Can you please disconnect your screen? Yeah, great.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so can you see?
Yep.
I guess you should be able to see the screen now. So, okay, we've built a couple of examples, and I want to walk you through the limit order bot. This is a permissionless bot, so Gearbox users who have connected this bot to their accounts can place limit orders, and anybody, literally any party, can execute these orders if they can be executed at this moment. Yeah. So first of all, like, we have some basic data structure that keeps all the order data, like input, output tokens, input amounts, limit price, and so on. Also, we have some state variable that holds all these orders. Yeah. Two simple functions that allow users to place and cancel orders. Yeah, they are basically nothing special, but we need to ensure in this function that user cannot manipulate orders of other users. And now let's actually go to the execution function. Yeah, as I said, it can be called by anybody, so there are no like access modifiers. This function expects some order identifier and a series of suppose, yeah, a series of operations needed to perform the swap of input token to output token. As it's been said before, there must be actual call to bot multi-call function of credit facade. And we only need to now make sure that this multi-call doesn't perform any malicious activity, it doesn't steal any assets or something, and also that this multi-call actually does what it should do, that is swap assets. So let's analyze how we've done it. Yeah, we have a validate order function. This function basically checks that order is not expired, order is triggered if trigger price was set, and basically that order can be executed right now. It also returns the amount of output token that we should receive after the multi-call. Next, we do some call validation, and what happens here is we validate that each subcall targets the approved adapters. Yeah, that is Uniswap, V3, V2, and SushiSwap. We basically limit only to these adapters because they are mostly sufficient to perform a swap. And this function would revert if we face the call to some other adapter. We also parse tokens that are spent in this call. And to understand why, consider the following scenario. There is some limit order to swap CRV token for wrapped Ether. Yeah, and one way to do it is to swap CRV to, say, USDC on SushiSwap, and then swap USDC to wrapped Ether on Uniswap. Yeah, so we know that there will be a call that spends USDC, and we must make sure that balance of USDC has not decreased during this all multi-call. So we collect here all tokens spent in these calls, yeah, and then we add balance check that validates that balances of all tokens spent in these calls are strictly or are greater than they were before the call. So in this way, we can ensure that this multi-call doesn't steal any tokens and actually is valid. Also, in this balance check, we check that output amount of output token is at least what the order has specified. And finally, we do some minor validation that the amount of input token spent in the call is also correct. Finally, we delete this old order in order for it not to get executed twice. And basically the function is done. So I guess that's all for limit orders.
Yeah,
you can view all the codes on GitHub.
Yeah. Can you go back? So thanks so much. It's a really great explanation. And as all of us can see, there is no huge amount of code. So basically, I think everybody has a question about how long it takes to build this limit order bot from your side. How long you work for it?
I guess the whole process took around 2 weeks, where larger part of it was actually testing the code so that it indeed acted as intended. So the coding the bot itself took like 4 days probably.
Okay, and what do you think about how we can really create better experience for developers? Because people in many cases really like to clone some repository, then make a few changes and build their own bot. So which parts we can encapsulate to provide maybe ready-made template when you can clone, adapt for your needs, and use to build a strategy?
So there are probably multiple things that can be reused in different bots. First of all, everybody can use these tutorials because they have some like safety considerations that are useful for probably all the bots one can write. Yeah, and it's good to read these tutorials. But also we can all these bots share some call validation. Yes, so we may create some infrastructure for that so that people didn't have to write like nested code checking that each call is to a specific adapter or doesn't target a specific adapter. Yeah. Also, we can create like some testing suites as it's frequently made with in Gearbox. Probably, yeah. And I guess we can prepare some role management system as well, because there are not like so many ways one can implement it. And if we have a single set of like role models that are audited and can be reused, it would be great.
Okay, thanks so much. Great example. Maybe someone on the call have any technical questions at the moment, or we can move a little bit further and text about next topic related to automation.
I'd like to jump in and ask, like, how do you see maybe it's something that we're gonna cover later, but how do you see the incentives of calling that bot? Basically, who would call that?
I think, yeah, you are really, thanks for these questions. You are really looks deeper on a problem, and I believe it's our next topic after automation, and it's more related about building market of automation strategies, payments, and so on and so on. Before we go here, I'm definitely happy to talk a little bit more about one more significant part of bots. What we already discussed, we have an ability on the Gearbox itself to allow some third-party contracts, which we call bots, execute different list of transactions. Then we just discussed how we can create a trust model inside to really show users the code and do not trust people who are willing to manage their portfolio, trust the real code, which is immutable. So you can really check which things you allow. And Dima shows a great example how we can validate different things. And of course, there is one more piece which is significant for bot execution is automation, because if you want to go to vacation to Swiss Alps and leave your ledger somewhere, you should expect that there is a really good part which will execute. And to be honest, really from my Web2 experience, it's a very, very critical and complex task to support such a stuff. You need usually DevOps, you need some people who really manage that your infrastructure works. It's a very, very complex software. And thanks, we have Gelata. So a brief things what I've learned from the documentation that you should build two different smart contract or function. One should check that there is a real need to make a call and it helps us to get call data or prepare call data. If you really want to use Gearbox router, keep in mind that it should be a view method, because to find the most optimal way requires 100 or sometimes 200 or 300 millions of guess, which could be done for static call using Ethereum node, but it could not be done online. So then you forward your data to executor, which executes data and get payment for gas. And of course, this executor forward call data to the bot, which definitely implements strategy what you want. But in this case, I think the best explanation how we can build this automation, we can listen from Gelato team. Are you ready, guys? Can you make this presentation?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Mikael. Thanks for giving the quick intro. Can you hear me? I guess so. Yeah, and hey, of course, to all the other guys in the call as well. Happy to see you. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly show you, because I actually went into the code before this call and just wrote like a small example of how this would actually work with like the credit facade interface, the bot multi-call and everything, and tested it already out. So how you could do that with Gelato, and basically what you could do is, if you write, let's say, instead of this limit order use case that you showed a second ago, right? Let's say we keep it easy here and we just want your credit account to call this increase count function, right? This is just like a dummy function where the message sender will be stored in a mapping and you just increment a count with an amount that you pass, right? This could be a limit order that is executed. This could be a strategy that's executed, right? This is just an example for now. Then if you want to do that with Gelato, what you need basically is you need this function that you want to get executed, and then you need another function, which is a view method. By the way, it doesn't have to be a view method. It can also be just an external method, because this function will only be called off-chain with a static call, so it will actually not be executed on-chain. And you need this checker function, which basically does some checks. In here, we check, hey, did 3 minutes pass since the last execution, right? So this is just like a check that checks, okay, please, this increase count function can only be called every 180 seconds. And then what you do is you return the function that you want to execute and the payload that you want to execute it with, right? In this case, we want to use the balance of this particular contract. And then this is the entry function that will actually be called, which is this increment counter via credit account function. And this actually calls the facade that you define, that we stored here in as a constant. And this is just like a dummy facade that I deployed earlier. And then we encode the function here that we want to call. And this is this increase count function, right? So this is just a very simple example. And what I did, I went ahead and I deployed this contract already. So you can go to app.gelato network. You see tasks from other people that are using it right now. We are on the Girly testnet. What you can do is you can copy in the contract. I couldn't verify it because, yeah, sometimes Etherscan is down if you want to verify contracts, right? You know the drill. So we type in the ABI in here. Then we can select the function that we want Gelato to call on our behalf, which is the increment counter via credit account function in this case. And the cool thing here is that we talked about access restrictions a minute ago, right? Shall we make the function public, or should we have a modifier in there? And one cool thing that Gelato provides you out of the box is you can have all the nodes within Gelato execute this function on your behalf, but they all have to go through one single entry point at the beginning and route this transaction, this call, via a proxy contract. And every user that creates an account or creates a task in Gelato has their own dedicated message sender contract where only their own tasks get executed through. This just makes sure that you have a higher security, and only the task that you create can actually call your function, and no one else can create a task that then calls your function as well. This is just enhances security quite a bit. What you then do is you go into resolver, which is basically the name of the smart contract that has this function here, which is the function that returns the payload, right? We put it in here. And we have to, again, take the ABI, we paste in here, we select the checker function, and then the borrower is basically my address, right? So this would be the address of the credit account or the owner of the credit account. And then you can just, and we're talking about payments, right? How do we incentivize executors to actually execute these functions? And here you can simply just deposit, I don't know, in 1 ETH or whatever into your Gelato balance. And then for each execution, the Gelato executors in this case will get the gas fees that they had to pay plus a small premium on top as a compensation for executing the gas, right? And the cool thing is, in the new version from Gelato is you can, let's say, deposit USDC soon here on Polygon, and then you can run strategies on all chains you want and only pay with that USDC on Polygon for like tasks on Ethereum, Avalanche, Optimism, or whatnot. So you don't even have to manage multiple balances anymore. Let's call it Gearbox test task, right? And then we create it. We first sign a message, which is we sign the name, which is stored off-chain, not on-chain, and then we send this. And then basically what will happen is we create this task on chain, we hash the contract target address and the function selector that should be executed for access security. And so Gelato nodes can basically only execute the function that you specified, and with the data that is defined in this sort of checker function. And once the event is fetched via the subgraph, we will be routed back to the task page, which is then the page where you see like how often your task is executed. This is like the sort of trustless way. We are here, right? And now we have the task here, and then we'll actually also soon get logs that show when something gets executed. One cool thing that I would like to show you as well is something like some alpha for you guys, is if you building strategies and you want, or you're building frameworks for other people to build strategies, what we are soon launching are our, what we call Web3 function product. So rather than writing smart contracts, and this is a bit more trusted. So this is so like you can make this as completely trustless here, of course, if you enforce everything on chain. But sometimes you need sort of some data that is not available on chain, right? Sometimes you might need some APIs, some subgraph data, some data from other chains or whatever. In this case, what you can do is you can write these Web3 functions. And these Web3 functions are basically like TypeScript logic that can call, let's say, the CoinGecko API to retrieve the price on CoinGecko, decode it, and then do the same spiel here again, which is return true when Gelato nodes should execute, and then the data that Gelato should use to execute it. And what you can do is you can hash that, you can deploy the script to IPFS. And then once you deploy to IPFS, you get a CID from IPFS back. And then you can do the exact same thing. You can go to Gelato. This is, by the way, our beta website. And this time, rather than defining, hey, this is still the contract we want to execute, right? This is still the ABI of that contract. Sorry, going back to this. And now selecting the ABI. And now there's some error in here. Anyways, but by the way, it doesn't matter now, but you can basically input this CID in there instead of the smart contract, and then Gelato nodes will basically run this script on your behalf. And of course, you would have to trust Gelato nodes that they actually input the correct data, but you could also, as a user, run a server where you cross-sign that data, for example, to get extra security there. But this is just to enable people to have more flexibility. And the execution flow will then look like this. You have Gelato nodes, they call the Gelato smart contract with the data. Then they route this through a proxy contract, which only the tasks that your UA created beforehand on Gelato, only tasks that you created get routed through this proxy. And then you have this message sender whitelisted either on the facade or somewhere else. I'm not sure where you would whitelist it, but you will probably tell me, Mikhail. And then you will execute the function on the facade, which then executes the function on the credit account. And there you have like the complete flow from start to finish, and it should be fairly secure. And here we actually saw the first transaction already happening, right? On Gurley 1 minute ago, Gelatobots executed this counter example through Gearbox, and yeah, we paid this Gelato bot 0.0006 ETH as a compensation for that. Yeah, so this is as easy as it gets basically to do that.
Yeah, it sounds really amazing. I really impressed, especially with your last feature when you can implement some JavaScript code and use it for automated trading. So is it possible, for example, to use some Binance data or any Sexis data to manage portfolio? Because sometimes things happen faster or centralized exchanges. And if I want to really rebase my portfolio based on this data, is it possible to really implement using such a thing or not?
Exactly. You can call any sort of API with that, deploy that logic to IPFS, and then create a task pointing Gelato nodes to that IPFS hash, and then they load that script and execute it. And then basically the Gelato nodes will come to a consensus on that data that is returned by that script. And if the majority of these nodes sign off on that data, then they will basically use it. Of course, this is not the same trust assumption as in Ethereum, right? You sort of trust this other network, but yeah, what our mission is basically to make this as trust minimized as possible. And yeah, this provides you with just much more flexibility. You can call APIs. You can even call data from other chains, right? And you can run a strategy based on what happens on Polygon, right? On Ethereum. So yeah, it just opens the door for a much wider array of use cases.
And do you have any estimations on the latency or like for the centralized parties, or if we get any information from other chains?
Latency in terms of like these Web3 functions that you can write, you can basically specify how often you want to run them, right? And by default, the default configuration is you want to run them 60 seconds every minute is the default configuration. But in this is the current state. In the future, we want you to be able to do that every block. So every block, these scripts should run. And how the payment works, of course, it's like computational overhead, right? And the more computation you consume with these Web3 functions, the more basically you have to pay. But the payments is basically just like a streamed payment that then goes to these nodes. But yeah, so latency wise, it's very, very fast. But it depends how often you want to run these scripts, basically, right?
Hey, I have one question. Can you hear me? Yeah, it wasn't. Can you confirm, because when you were explaining about getting data from external sources, you also mentioned to sign the data in order to ensure, you know, the provenance or the source of this data. So, but then you mentioned that there is a consensus level about the execution of that data. So
yep.
I'm wondering, is there a consensus layer where you ensure that if I write a script hosted in IPFS that says you need to get the information from this place, you are gonna 100% ensure to me that the data is gonna come from the place that my script is saying?
So basically how this will work in the Web3 function is there is this sort of what we call the configuration script. And in the configuration script, it is basically up for each user to define the level of data integrity that they want for their task, right? So sometimes like APIs return different data every millisecond, right? To different nodes. In this case, it wouldn't be practical to have like multiple nodes come to a consensus on the data. So then you would have to choose basically a node operator that you trust to get that data on. Hopefully at some point you could even run your own node that does that, right? But you could, for example, say, hey, I trust the node run by the Gearbox team, for example, right? If the data is more idempotent, so if you can, for example, with a subgraph, you can say, hey, I want to query the data on Polygon at block 100, right? And then the data should be most of the times the same. Then you can basically say, hey, I want 20% or 30% of the Gelato nodes to basically sign off that data. So they all have to come to agreement that this was the data indeed. And if more than 20% said yes, then I want to execute. You can also say more than 80%. You can also say, okay, if only one does it. So it's sort of like up to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that part for me is very interesting because, yes, I agree that some APIs might give you RAM information at different times, but if you can pin that to a particular thing and kind of generate a receipt and you say, this is the data that I wanted, let's say at this specific time, probably, yeah, I love that part.
Yeah, it's like there's no perfect solution right here, but you have to sort of just provide flexibility to the users and let them sort of choose the trade-off between the data that's returned, how consistent that is, and then how many nodes can actually sign off of that. It's like a thing where you just have to find the right balance and trade-offs.
I'll chime in here real quick. I want to ask a question as well. I really like the Gelato interface, to be honest. That's really dope to be able to create a job that easily. It's like mandatory and should be like that everywhere. Now, how do you ensure actually that the bots, the Gelato bots, are not, for example, sandwiching the transaction and manipulating the markets in order to benefit from what the user is automating?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, we like only EOAs can of course execute these transactions, right? There's no flash loan attacks possible in the system, but of course transactions can still be bundled and like via flashbots, and then you can still sandwich people. And this is actually a really good question, and because it goes back to the point that was mentioned earlier around do you want permissioned bots or do you want open bots, right? The problem is if anyone can execute, then like one execution is not equal to the other execution, right? You can execute a limit order, you can execute a sort of strategy on behalf of a user, but then you can bundle it up in a transaction where you manipulate the Uniswap price, or you do something in order to try, even if it's a small value, to try to abstract it away, right? And so what we do on the protocol level for nodes is we, for example, force them to go on mainnet via flashbots, for example. This is on the Gelato client implementation enforced. If some nodes sort of differ from that, then they get blacklisted from the system. There's a stake from these executors that is actually going to go live at the end of this quarter. They will then get slashed if they don't align with the protocol. In this way, it will be a bit similar to like how chaining operates as well, or how they want to operate at least. So it's all about like, and this is why there's a trade-off, right? There's this fully permissionless, open, decentralized automation systems. And then there are those, and there I would classify Gelato where, yes, it is open and decentralized, but there are certain requirements that you want from these bot operators to make sure that they don't maliciously exploit it, but you want to have a lot of them. So like the system cannot go down at any point in time. So there is some sort of subjectivity involved, which we are currently solving by having our DAO whitelist node operators, and they have to make like a proposal and show who they are, and they basically are known parties, right? For example, staking facilities that also run Lido nodes or something, and then let them stake. And then they have to adhere to the protocol, which is don't front run, don't sandwich, use flashbots for front running protection, etc. And this is, I think, right now, so like the best approach. And maybe with ZK proofs or something and trusted execution environments, we can even make it more trustless over time. But yeah, the tech there is not 100% ready yet, unfortunately.
Got it.
Yeah, thanks. So clear topics. And we are definitely go to really one topic we already talked today, but how to say, the last but not least, and maybe we should start from it, and we talked a little bit before, but now I think it's a very, very interesting how to build product, because here we discussed some big technical pieces which we should implement. So it's strategy itself, it could be a browser, it could be, I don't know, maybe some mobile application which allow you to manage your credit account with some limitation, because sometimes you have a lot of funds there and you have some limited account which would not be able to really involve all funds, but maybe make a small changes and it's good. Maybe it could be like quant or analytical tool. Maybe it could be great strategies which our today partners builders. The next part is bot. And we already talked about how to build it, how to structure code. And the last part is automation, which could create a really similar experience for end user. However, what we are really interested in is to discuss, when all parts are clear, how we can really market, how we can build product and offer it to users, to end customers, because we in Gearbox are really share this value of composability. And as I can see in all DeFi, there is no way to try to build everything. So how we can combine our efforts to really market the product, offer it to users, and create great experience? I don't know, maybe Ilgis, you can add something as a product guy here, or anyone who wants.
I can quickly jump in here.
Yeah,
I think what I would say is, and I'm a big fan of this, is like we need like these bundled solutions, right? Because I think there are amazing people here in the call with like Melo, for example, right? The Brahma guys that are building like crazy good strategies and have the tools ready for that. We have the Gearbox toolkit. We have infrastructure players like us, and of course, like with Keeper, with the Wonderland guys, right? So I think they're all the puzzle pieces are there, and they are sort of different options, and everyone can then put together their selections based on their trade-offs. But there is no sort of single bundle solution, SDK, documentation and demo that sort of shows all these things together nicely. And so having, I think, these tools and just enabling people to type in like npm or like yarn create Gearbox bot or whatever, like a script like that, like create React app, right? And then you have a skeleton with everything already in place with the different sort of examples that you can choose, and then just take it from there. And you just have to sort of be creative and sort of figure something out, but all the other things are already configured. I think that would be super cool, and that we could also like all push together out there and get into the hands of developers. So I think the tool, like the solutions are already kind of there. We just need to sort of bundle them up and document them.
Yeah, sounds cool. Maybe someone also wants to add something, how to build. Of course, each startup after successful Apple experience want to build something like Apple Store, ecosystem, and all other bullshit words. And of course, we do not expect that with this feature, tomorrow billion of bots will be there. However, it looks like maybe we can talk about something like plugin catalog or bot catalog. And in this case, it's a very, very interesting example because we here have a few different parts here. So different people could work together to create this experience. And at the same time, we should have some like a product guy who will really drive the whole system. So how we can really make this offer, how to build this successful bot, and basically maybe any ideas for people who will check this video during the hackathons. I believe in the future we will set up such a goal to build the bots. So any ideas how we can combine different pieces, create a product which could really have a good usage?
One more thing I'd like to add in order to how to create a good product and how to combine automation with Gearbox is something just to take into account. Maybe we don't have the current solution or the best solution, but something is the thing of who pays for that transaction piece, right? Like if the user now puts a stop loss and there's a bot that a Keeper Network or Gerato bot or any bot that will run the transaction, how does the user at the end of the day pay that bot? Or if maybe Gearbox says, okay, we're gonna cover all of the automation costs for every single user, and they pay everything up front in a wallet, for example, as the people at Gerato were showing, like, hey, like you can top up the balance and then that's it. Or do you think of any other strategy? What we thought maybe was like a cool idea was that the user, when they, basically the user, when they ask for some lending, the lenders could pay the transaction cost of would pay the transaction cost of the automation, let's say for the transaction, the gas cost, and at the end of the day, to the user, as soon as that automation happens, they get kind of a fee, an added fee of that lended money they got initially. So basically the lender would cover the cost temporarily, and then the user would get that cost as a fee of the loan they initially asked. Did you think something of that sort?
Yeah, I think at first part, I believe, I know maybe someone wants to add some things, or I can wrap up and then we can really finalize our session. Any mentions, ideas?
What was the question again?
Yeah,
I just missed it a bit, so maybe it would help.
Any ideas,
maybe,
because we are wrapping up?
So
yeah, sorry, Mikhail. I just thought that maybe I can also add something here because, like, I think the users always have an issue choosing the strategies, and it's like only sophisticated users can build their own strategies. So they need to clearly understand how everything works and what kind of strategies do they need to combine or build themselves. So in this case, the solutions that maybe we have or other protocols have, they also can help, maybe not now, but later, to eliminate these problems with the choice, because we can build more complex strategies, and those strategies, or anyone can come and build strategies on top of Mellow or other protocols. And those more complex strategies can fit different needs in terms of the risk profile, like the yield and so on. So in these terms, I think it's always good for the majority of people to have the one-stop solution where you deploy your funds, you understand the risks, you understand the current profitability or the historical profitability, and you also get the one-stop solution where you just deploy your liquidity and see how it goes, and it's also under your control. So the main point here is like you need to have simpler solution in terms of the interface for the users, not just to give the tool set to build the strategy, but also to provide the ready-made strategies that can hedge the risk or that can be more degen style, and the user won't need to build something complex on his side.
Xerox Joker, do you want to add something?
yeah, so one suggestion I have for bots is that, like, let's say as a user, right? Whenever I'm subscribing to a bot, I'm basically looking for some sort of automation. But at the same time, if we have a set of standard, right, where you can ensure, okay, for this particular bot operation, your health factor is not going to drop by a certain factor, right? Similarly, there will not be a fund transfer of USDC balance, like your USDC balance is not going to drop by a certain percentage or slippage, right? So this way, if we can come up with like a common Gearbox recommended standard, right? So that like bot operators like us and others can follow. So that way, like it could be beneficial for the users as well to ensure, like, okay, whenever they are subscribing to a Gearbox assisted bot, they are sure, okay, these assumptions are always taking place, right? So kind of have the checks at the multi-call level, but users having the optionality for users to configure them, right?
Yeah, so this trust should be built in bot, and it depends on operation and what you're going to allow. And we really try to cover all possible cases. However, it's really depend on task you are willing to solve with bot.
I do agree on that, but there are few, let's say, cases where, okay, for example, right? So whenever a Gearbox, on Gearbox, if you are performing a multi-call, it ensures that, okay, your health factor is not dropping below 1, right? So that is enabled at a protocol level. So maybe even on the dev examples that you are providing, right? So if you have like a modifier list that can be recommended for bot operators, that could be a great place to start, right? So that way we have a standard established from the get-go, and any new operators can start on that, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Thanks for your great insights. I think it's time for wrapping up. At first, really thanks for these great conversation examples and ideas. And I really like the idea which was mentioned that we can create a really better developer experience, combining different stuff. From the practical side, I really believe we will publish this video as a part of developer documentations. And at the same time, if you have any ideas, inspirational use cases, and so on, we can also publish them on developers portal as well, because it's a very good. And of course, if you are interested to add an ability or links to developers documentations for Gelato, for Melo, and so on, any example of people who participated today, to simplify developers the way how they could build bots. And I told in the beginning, we have a really great way to attract much more people in DeFi, and people are looking for a solution. And now we have a lack of tools, a lack of great tools to manage portfolio. And at the same time, for developers, if you set up a big goal to build something automatically, you should cover a lot of stuff together. Thanks for composability, we can solve this task together. And at this case, thanks for everyone. And let's build the next building block in the DeFi ecosystem in a composable way. Ivan, maybe a few words from your side.
No, nothing. Just thanks to everyone for joining and contributing in a very cool, meaningful way. As a non-developer, I expected it to be very boring, which it ended up being, which is fantastic, but it was very interesting at the same time as well. So even though I understood only about the half, it was very inspiring. Not joking. So thanks again to everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, thank you.
Thanks,
Also, by
everyone.
the way,
Cheers, bye-bye.
we'll be writing an article
Okay.
overview of what we discussed on the call. So I think some of our contributors will reach out to you to like get a quote or something so that we can present a solution that is not just about Gearbox, but like give a perspective of what and how everybody looks at this thing and how to build it. So just FYI. No rush on that though. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye. Thanks again.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for participation. Thanks for support team who really helped to make this call real. Really great job. Thanks for everybody who helped to prepare.
Let's see if it's going to be
and
recorded or
participated.
not. Are you going to kill me if it's not recorded?